And now, as longtime members, Aline and John Schwab come forward to light our chalice. I invite you to rise in either body or spirit and join together in the affirmation of faith, which is printed on the back of your bulletin. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human needs, for these high purposes to unite in worship.
Is this on? So when we first moved into this church, this was the symbol of lighting our candle. And since then, we've gone to this. And to me, it's a symbol of what really has gone on in this church in terms of the fellowship and the love we share through the years.
And I have an excerpt from a poem by Amanda Gorman, Hymn for the Hurting by Amanda Gorman. We may not just grieve, but give. We may not just ache, but act. May our signed right to bear arms never blind our sight from shared harm. May we choose our children over chaos. May another innocent never be lost.
Well, like many of you, I enjoy walking on trails through rich, lush woods. Since childhood, there's been something comforting and appealing about being surrounded by trees, by bushes, by wildflowers. I feel safe walking in the woods, of course, vigilant for any harmful plant or wildlife. Smells, images, challenges of terrain, they all invite me. I never thought much about it. I just absorbed the rejuvenating feelings among the trees. I wonder, have any of you had similar experiences? I expect a lot in this room. Today, I want to reflect on how trees can inspire our own spiritual deepening. I get it why our transcendentalist Unitarian ancestors understood that God resides in the natural world, here with us, as close as the next tree or flower. Consider Ralph Waldo Emerson's book, Nature, of 1836, or Henry David Thoreau's essay about sauntering in 1860. Take a copy with you next time you ramble in the woods. This book has been with me on many hikes in Yellowstone Park. I just throw it in my backpack. Perfect place to read from nature. I know many people are inspired by trees. I've attended many spiritual retreats, which include time outdoors, walking among the trees, sketching them, sitting near them in contemplation. There's a beech tree on the property at Pendle Hill Quaker Retreat near Philadelphia, which probably began life around 1680. What a trip through history that gnarled trunk represents. Already a robust adult at the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, just a few miles away. Weathering broken branches and lost limbs, but still going strong. Our understanding of trees has expanded considerably in the last decade, especially through the work of Suzanne Simard, who's a Canadian forest ecologist. Her recent book, Finding the Mother Tree, and I offer a view of this book, not that you can see it in detail, but to remind you about what it looks like next time you're in your favorite bookstore. This book has expanded my attitudes toward both the science and the spirituality of trees. So just to confirm, that title is in the order of service if you want to visit your favorite bookshop later this afternoon. Simard grew up among the trees, which became the subject of scientific research. She suggests that when we walk in the woods, there's more going on than only us humans experiencing the trees. The trees are also experiencing us, modeling for us humans positive habits of relationships, which we can apply to families, to communities, perhaps even, and wouldn't we wish, to our political and government systems. Simard's book is also an inspiring personal memoir. She has had experiences in forests similar to mine, but of course multiplied hundreds of times over because of her professional work. So I relate to her memoir, the memoir aspect of this book. Her research explains many mysteries of forest ecology, especially through her brave assertion that trees are capable of sentience, that is, sensation, intelligence, protection, and communication. And what is most intriguing is her concept of the mother tree as the center of tree communications, as we saw our trees this morning. This woman of science, that is Simard, clearly understands that trees can teach humans about spiritual connections. We do well to emulate trees, how they nurture and care for one another and other life in the forest. Simard has been in love with trees her whole life. She intuited many of her scientific findings that she eventually concluded before she began to study them. Then, early in her professional career, she worked for the Canadian Forest Service. She challenged many lumber industry practices driven by dollar signs, like clear-cutting forests, eliminating species diversity, and replacing old-growth forests with fast-growing homogeneous species. Early on, she was convinced that trees thrive through cooperation, not competition, challenging survival of the fittest, Darwinian individualism. This is key, challenging Darwinian notions of the individual and the survival of those who are the strongest. Her ideas were often met with ridicule and resistance, as you might imagine. She's challenging industry. She eventually shifted to academia, where, of course, there's never any arguments and discussions, to be on the faculty at the University of British Columbia. By now, her work is respected to the point that she's influencing policymaking in Canadian forestry. I can't explain all of Simard's work in one sermon, but to convey the importance of a few of her innovative theories, let's start with three basics about trees, which Simard bases her work on, and which I expect all of us are aware of, and which we actually saw illustrated in part. So first, basic. Trees exist above ground. As you imagine in your mind's eye, any woods or forest or prairie or grassland, surely you're aware of the growth above ground. Trees, bushes, vines, wildflowers. All of this growth requires nourishment. You're also probably aware of how the greenery of the forest supports photosynthesis, the process by which plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to create energy in the form of sugar with oxygen as byproduct. It seems pretty obvious that the forest above ground is alive and active, and the focus of much research earlier on about trees. A second basic that I'm sure most of us are aware of, a second reality is the devastating reality that humans are encroaching on the world of nature. And I'm thankful to Stephen Guy. He brought in this. It's from the opinion section of this morning's paper. I realize you might not see details. It's a picture of stumps of trees cut down and a lone tree, which might be the mother tree perhaps, with an arc at the top. So I encourage you, if you look at the paper, today's paper, they must have known that we were preaching on this morning. Thank you, Stephen. Many in this world have decided that if bigger and better and faster is good for humans, it must be good for Mother Earth, right? Since 1600, 1/3 of the planet's forests have been lost. especially to the lumber industry. Only 1% of the current coverage are old-growth forests. 40% of logging is still clear cutting, and many commercial growers have sped up growing time, in effect force-feeding the forests. These growing habits release large amounts of carbon dioxide and displace animal life. A third basic about the forest, immobility. Notice a third reality about the natural world, influenced by seasonal influences. We can know where we are on the yearly calendar just by looking at the state of trees. We realize trees don't have legs. They can't come out of the cold weather. They can't move as the weather gets cold. They can't move to warmer climates like animals do. And trees don't congregate as do packs of wolves or sheep or birds for greater warmth. In seeing trees' mobility, Simard came to realize that we may consciously or unconsciously regard trees and other plant life as less than animal life, rooted to the earth as helpless, solitary, and indifferent to one another, just trying to survive until the next springtime. So these three basics about trees, so let me review. Important growth is above ground. We're forcing growth faster and faster. And there's the inability to move. Three of the basics that grounded her research. They're all true. But she has shown that there's much more to trees than these basic assumptions. She has shown that trees communicate, existing in cooperation, not competition. Let's take another look at the three basics about the forest that I've identified and how Suzanne Simard has expanded our thinking about trees. Trees can inspire human relationships and compassionate communications. So first, clearly plant life above ground creates beautiful carpets, beautiful canopies, beautiful scenery. What Simard and others have recently called attention to is the equally important networks of communication below ground. Without the larger, complex networks of root systems, plant life would not survive. For example, some prairie grasses have roots estimated to be 10 times longer underground than the plants above ground. Root systems in a constant process of negotiating, reciprocity, and outreach, not only to roots of their own plant species, but to roots of other species. Even more important, tree roots also connect with networks of fungi under the ground, mycelia, that is in thin, white, delicate networks of fungus filaments underground, which assist in the decomposition of plant material underground. Above ground, mushrooms are, in effect, the flowers of these underground fungi. Delicate mycelia are critical to the sustenance of even the most gigantic trees, hundreds of feet tall and hundreds of years old. Across time, plants figured out how to turn sunlight into sugar for energy. But they had trouble pulling nutrients from rocks, while fungi could extract minerals from rocks, but needed plants for photosynthesis. Thus, trees and fungi developed a complex system of selflessness and reciprocity, allowing the transfer of life-sustaining materials from the oldest and biggest to the youngest and smallest, the healthiest to the ailing. Simard has demonstrated how much a forest is a collective of cooperation and gratitude, an important way of living which we humans do well to emulate. And I expect many of you in this room are much more acquainted with the biology and the science of tree roots than I am. But I would encourage anybody, if you haven't ever looked at what's under a tree, next time you have an opportunity of digging up the earth, look closely at all the networks underneath. Imagine if humankind cooperated as faithfully as the forest. Imagine the compassion and love if we lived in similar networks of mutual support. If we consistently lived by the values defined in Unitarian Universalism's seventh principle, in affirming the interconnectedness of all life. Delicate fungi remind us that it is often the smallest, briefest, thinnest positive connections which support a great structure. A smile between two people, a brief expression of gratitude, an outstretched hand of welcome. These thin networks, coincidentally a theme we explored yesterday in our final Circles of Trust session for this cycle. We also know that visitors to congregations may decide within minutes of walking into a new congregation whether this is the place for them, based on these brief connections. In contrast, the briefest slight or derogatory words, like an injured fungi underneath the ground, may require repair and rebuilding, or may signal an absence of welcome. As in the forest, important nurturing among humans happens often in the smallest, thinnest connections, both above and below ground. Reflecting on the second basic about trees, that is, that faster is better, in exploring the concept of the mother tree, Suzanne Simard has also significantly changed the lumber industry's practice of speeding up the growing and clear-cutting of forests and planting new forests of only one species. Only 10 to 20 years to mature a tree, as some lumber industries aim for, is human scheduling, not Mother Nature's schedule. That beech tree in Philadelphia is proof of long-term survival. Hundreds of years of slow maturation gives trees a chance to build up resistance to disease and to interact with all life in the forest. As for promoting diversity, Simard's research has also demonstrated how birch trees and Douglas firs cooperate, as just one example, in exchanging chemicals necessary for the survival of both. They really do need one another. Those trees can teach us humans. Have you ever been in a hurry to finish a project, to reach a goal, to run ahead of everyone else? Perhaps to cross the finish line alone without a community? When you do seek the company of others, how intentional are you to diversify your associations with people of different color or economic class? How do you promote diversity? Not only to talk about why it's important, but to actively live among people and values which are not like you. Isn't this call for diversity core to one of the many current initiatives in Unitarian Universalism, such as the program called Widening the Circle of Concern, calling us to practice all the more anti-racism and anti-oppression? Healthy forests model compassionate and diverse connections in our communities and our congregations. The third basic, as for trees not knowing enough to get out of the cold, well, this is where Simard's contributions are probably the most innovative and controversial. Just because trees can't walk doesn't mean they are passively engaged in this process of being alive. To identify trees as intelligent begs us to reconsider our definition of intelligence and to reconsider how we draw preconceptions of other life through our own lenses. Simard has shown that trees are intelligent, creative, and sentient, capable of experiencing sensations. Her experiences have proven that trees alter their behavior in the presence of other plants. They respond to odors given off by animals and even by us humans walking through the forests. They are also caretakers. Mother trees send special doses of fueling to seedlings that are in danger, helping them recover from injury. Indeed, the trees invite us humans to consider how we define intelligence, creativity, and value in all life forms. Now, I'm not just talking about trees and other plants. What grounds our evaluation and interpretation of other human beings? Has another's skin color, or economic class, or educational level ever influenced how you regard the worth and dignity of another person? Certainly, our own personal biases are often unconscious, and they're often compounded by systemic biases we all live with in systems of racism and classism and sexism and ableism and so much more. But the forest can inspire us, as Simard said, to live in interspecies covenant with one another, offering important lessons for our own covenants with other human beings as we walk together and practice accountability. Suzanne Simard calls us to transformative thinking for the survival of forests, for the survival of humanity, for the survival of life and love and compassion. She invites us to recognize that trees and plants have agency. They perceive, they relate, they communicate. They cooperate, they make decisions, they learn, they remember. Qualities we normally ascribe to wisdom and intelligence. By acknowledging this sentience, we can acknowledge that trees deserve the same regard we accord ourselves. Mistreatment of one species is mistreatment of all. So, my friends, perhaps later today, you might saunter in the forests or contemplate a tree on your block. You might also look around the people you interact with to identify the mother trees, or perhaps you yourself are a mother tree. May you always remain vigilant for how our respect and love for this interconnected web of life of which we are all a part continues to inspire and transform our care for Mother Earth, her care for us, and our care for one another. May all this be so.